Hey everyone, it's Jill. My research project was about the way that gender roles are reproduced through toy ads, toy product descriptions and advertisements targeted towards children. So basically, toy ads are one way that gender roles are reproduced and reflected, but sometimes the messages that they send are toxic. I hypothesized that if I were to analyze the language patterns used in these ads, that I would find a disproportionate representation of language emphasizing violence in ads targeted towards boys, and language emphasizing service to others in ads targeted towards girls. And that's pretty much what I researched. So to get this information, I took a look at the Toys R Us website. Toys R Us is one of the oldest, biggest toy companies in America, and I looked at the website because then I was able to take a look at text rather than analyzing audio information or anything like that. So what I did was I went to the website, I clicked on the list of girls' toys and the list of boys' toys. I sorted it by best selling, and I grabbed the top 20 best-selling girls' toys and boys' toys on the site. What I did was I grabbed the product descriptions of each of those, I plugged it into word cloud and gathered a word count of each of those. I took out non-words, numbers and things like that, WWWs and things like that that weren't actually words. And I basically put together a list. I combined similar words, so baby, babies, babied, things like that, and basically combined them and summed them up so that I had a pretty comprehensive list. The boys list and the girls list. Um, at that point, I created some categories based on sort of my initial eyeballing of sort of like the themes that I observed in the words just from doing all that work that I did so far. I observed a couple of different categories, and so I saw that I had family, kinship, babies, physical caretaking, body parts, housework, clothing, animals, food, touch, danger, teamwork, technology, things like that. So I found some categories, and then I started tagging these words, and I just went down the list for the boys group and the girls group, and I just started adding tags to each word. And this was thousands and thousands of words, and so it took a while. Um, but the result was a girls data set and a boys data set. Um, and I had a list of volume for each category of word, and the volume had the total count of words in that category and variety. So for, say, family and kinship, the girls' data set would have, a volume of words that was maybe they said, had 1,000 words in family and kinship, but the variety was maybe they only had 2 different words, that were unique in that category. So there's 2 measures within each data set for each category. That's pretty much how I came to those, to get that data. So just real quick, this is one snapshot of the data that I have. This would be the volume measure. This is the total count of words in each category. You can see along the bottom, these are the categories that I used. If I can just grab my, I guess, pen, you can see we have kinds of words, categories of words, different noun groups, I guess, basically. But then we also have, a couple of like dichotomous groups here. Like we have these two, which are, nonviolent and violent touch words. And you can see that they're sort of like inversely proportional. And then we have these different kinds of supportive words that are maximizing, minimizing, and then we also have references to self and references to others right here. But other than that, they're pretty much just different kinds of subjects, basically. But this is the volume measure of those groups, and you can see that we kind of have sort of like, you know, a girls in the lead sort of area over here, with family, babies, bodies, household, clothing, animals, things like that. And then we sort of have a boys in the lead area over here, and you can kind of see that in the data. I'll talk more about that on the next slide. This just shows the other measure that we have from the data, which is just variety. You can see that we have much lower numbers here, obviously, than volume. The volume was in, you know, the thousands, the varieties in the 100s. You can see that there is a slight variation in how far the leads are, but for the most part, if you're higher in volume on one side, you're also higher in variety on the same side. There are a few anomalies here and there, but you can see that this is pretty much the same information that we saw in volume. Not really any big surprises here. So other than identifying, you know, volume and variety of words, counts of words and categories, I also came up with a list of, or a ranking of, all the words that I collected and identified which words were high frequency and gender specific. So the list is, you know, extensive, but I just put here for you the top 5 for each one of the data sets. So for the girls data set, I have for you the top 5 gender specific high frequency words. So what this means is that these are the top 5 words that they appeared at an above average rate in the girls' data set. They appeared more often in the girls' data set than in the boys' data set, and they appeared with the highest frequency, the top 5 highest frequency in the girls' data set. So we have basically dolls, never appears in the boys' data set. It appears 62 times. So that's pretty much how you read this. That's the number 1 most frequent word in the girls' data set, and that is below average in the boys' data set, or in this case doesn't appear at all in the boys' data set. Then you see we have female pronouns. It appears 1,867% more often in the girls' data set than in the boys' data set. Appears 56 times in the girls' data set and 53 times more than in the boys' data set. That's pretty much how you read this. Magic. So that's the third most frequent. Appears 49 times in the girls' data set, which is 49 times more than the boys' data set. It makes no appearance in the boys' list. Little or lil, 39 times in the girls' count, doesn't appear in the boys' list. Apparently we don't say little in the boys' data set. And princess. So for a lot of you, you know, this seems like, well, of course, you know, I could have guessed this, but this is actual data to back up a lot of our assumptions, you know, which is what a lot of great research is about, I think, is, you know, I've in the past been able to go around and say a lot of this stuff, but now I can say that I've done research to back up my, you know, presumptions about these things. So these are the top 5 gender-specific high-frequency words that I got out of my my research. This is the boys' top 5 gender-specific high-frequency words. I don't really have anything else to add about what this means or how this was calculated. I just really want to point out that one kind of sad and unexpected result of this was number 3, smart. I really didn't see that coming. Battle, hero, blast, gear, I kind of expected those. I didn't expect smart to be number 3. That was really significant. That was a big surprise and significant result of this research. So I just wanted to point that out. Okay, so this is pretty much the rest of my research project, and this is pretty much everything else that I got out of my information that you would really need to know. My paper is extremely long. I'm sorry, Carrie. Um, and this is everything that I got that you really need to know. So these are the highlights. So basically, girls' toys. Way more babies than the boys. There's twice as much physical caretaking, twice as much more nonviolent touch, twice as much housework, clothing, animals, pets, and food, four times more dismissive language that is, minimizing the accomplishments of the girl, saying things like cute, mini, things like that, um, babified words, things like that. And language normalizing being alone is common to the girls' toys ads and descriptions. Boys' toys ads and descriptions, so there's twice as much more violent touch words, and three times more references to technology, 10 times more conflict and danger, twice as much teamwork, twice as much more indulgent language. And what I say when I mean that is overinflated or dramatic words, references to conventionally idealized qualities, references to large size, words meant to highlight, the complexity and skill required to use this, brave, legendary, mighty, things like that. And the language used normalizes the presence of others. So these are the significant differences that I found in my data. So basically, what I'm saying with all this is that the language is different. The advertisers are using different language when they're targeting boys and girls, and the language is reinforcing stereotypes, that are really restrictive, and that's detrimental to these people as they grow up, to children as they grow up. And the language is iconizing violence, as a trait of masculinity, and service as a trait of femininity. And children are associating those traits with those gender, identity categories, and that's harmful to them. So specifically with boys ads, the language that is used in the products marketed to them emphasizes, these qualities, and um, everything is dedicated to conflict and violence, and it encourages this environment where there's always a threat present, to justify this violence. And that kind of imaginary world really doesn't set a good premise for real life. And it only gives one kind of option for how boys are allowed to express themselves emotionally. They're discouraged from nonviolent touching. They don't really have a realistic idea of how to solve real problems or resolve conflicts. It hurts interpersonal relationships, and it doesn't really give them a good model for how to really interact with people in the real world. Um, you know, on the other hand, there were a lot of references to teamwork, much more references to teamwork than there were in the girls, twice as much actually. And I think that significantly, girls were completely absent from the boys' descriptions. So in this play world, girls don't exist. Boys are always talking about teams and squads and things like that. And I think that this environment of conflict and danger, um, kind of fosters, like I said, this like almost military like brotherhood in the face of danger or whatever. And that says a lot about modern masculinity, I think. So um, basically, this is sort of putting forth this idea about masculinity, that centers around conflict and violence, where they really can't operate their masculinity without violence being at the center. So not such a good thing, in my opinion. So other messages that we get out of this language is that, boys are always in this battle, and they're prompted to buy the gear, to defend themselves. Um, the they had three times the technology, words that the girls did. Um, you know, boys are encouraged to use technology, and this tendency carries into adulthood and the popular association of men with their toys, ATVs and guns and AV equipment and things like that. We say things like that all the time in our culture. And so, advertisers market technology differently to boys and girls. And that's really important because although, a lot of things determine what career individuals go into, early socialization like this is a factor. Um, and so the language that's used, in boys' product descriptions encourages them to be imaginative and be creative, and that fosters confidence and leads to, fulfilling lives. And the language in boys' product descriptions is indulgent. Like I said, it overcomplicates the description of the technology used and maximizes the boy's attributes or accomplishments. And the message is you have to be smart to use this toy. Like, wow, you've got to be really tough and smart to use this. In contrast, girls' language talks about it's so easy, you just have to do this, even you can do it. The message is you don't have to be smart to use this toy, and that's a really big difference. So like I said, smart is used 2,133% more in boys ads. Imagine is used 650% more in boys ads. Maybe a more subtle difference is that boys create and girls discover. Boys are the ones building things. Girls are the ones just finding something already built. So boys are encouraged to build and take control of their environment. Girls are encouraged to be unimaginative. They're not to create things, and that's lacking the creative element of play that's critical for development. They're more supposed to focus on just putting things on display, and that's a devaluation of female things, and that's kind of necessary for the next step, which I'm going to talk about on the next slide. So these are the things that the girls' product descriptions focus on. These values, restrict girls' imaginations of what women are capable of. And they prioritize appearances and the ability to please others over intelligence and self-actualization. I think that even though these toys are marketed to girls, it's significant that pronouns referring to males were used almost as often as they were in the descriptions for the boys' toys. So, males are still really the focus of attention in this world of girls' play. So, girls are taught that work and service to others is supposed to be fun. Um, so so that's really kind of shocking. Also, one of the most disturbing things about this is the obsession with pregnancy and birth. A huge portion of the girls' toys are centered on babies, or some aspect of them, directly or indirectly. And so, pregnancy, birth, and child rearing are romanticized, and that really positions girls and young women at a disadvantage later in life. Uh, Pregnancy and birth is really kind of the ultimate service. I mean, you're giving up your body to 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 to, to another person, at least temporarily, and then child rearing definitely is service to another person. So by romanticizing those commitments, toys set up an unreasonable expectation for fulfillment that women will take on these roles that benefit others, and but a lot of the messages that I see in the language are just me and my baby, just me and my baby against the world, and it's like trying to tell them that all it takes to be fulfilled is just to have the baby. Um, the and that sort of normalizes an isolation, and I didn't do research on this to back it up. This would be good for another project, but isolation is conducive to unhealthy and abusive situations, so that would be something for someone to take and do in another project. The boys' toys emphasize homosocial cooperation, like we saw. It emphasizes teamwork, That's not talked about at all in the girls' toys. That's never talked about. Um, Last thing I want to talk about on this, blind bags. I don't know if anybody else is aware of this, but blind bags and unboxing surprise toys are this really crazy, wild trend that kids are insane about, girls are insane about right now. Basically, like Hatchimals and LOL Surprise, and basically they buy these things, they don't know what's in them, then they do some kind of action, like soak it in water, or they rub a button, or they sing a song to it, or whatever, and then it emerges, from the casing or something, and then they get a mystery toy, and a lot of times the toy is like a baby or a baby animal, and the advertising and language around it are things like, "What are you gonna get? What kind of creature? What kind of baby creature is it gonna be? Take care of your baby thing or whatever." And it's like, um, this is a really weird trend, and I feel that it is a strange, and indirect metaphor for pregnancy and birth. The point of the toy is to make a commitment to buy the item, without knowing what's inside, and then you perform some kind of action to bring it forth, and then you reveal it. But what's really kind of amazing about it is that you have the girl, has to be willing to accept whatever's in it and deal with it. And so I feel like, we've had toys in the past that romanticize pregnancy and birth, and baby dolls and strollers and things like that. But this is kind of new in that I think it socializes girls to be willing to resign themselves to, well, I don't like what I got, but it's my own fault for picking this one, and that's a new thing. So I think that's worth noticing. Okay, so basically, what's the point, right? I mean, this is all great information that I got, but who cares, basically, right? So, I mean, what I want to say is that, regardless of gender, the common theme, if you go back and look at my data, the most debt words in the data set were dedicated to just selling the product, regardless of if it was girls or boys. Advertisers spend more than $17 billion every year marketing to children. Um, they they spend their money, not just on producing and airing ads, but also they dedicate millions to the latest neuroscience research. They want to know what emotions, images, and symbols will appeal most to young minds. Um, you know, it's important that we realize that this is not just coincidental. This is not natural. This is completely intentional. This is very carefully crafted, media that's being put forth. Um, they're advertisements aimed at children, and they're carefully crafted. Um, you know, they're manipulative messages. They're deeply embedded, so much so that it's hard for adults, to recognize them. Um, and that's important to know because media and ads play a huge role in gender socialization. And kids are especially susceptible to ads because they don't have the critical thinking skills to know the difference between ads and not ads. Um, so we need to realize that these messages are pervasive, they're aggressive, because there's money to be made here, um, and messages that play on existing stereotypes are going to resonate, especially with the very basic understandings, black and white understandings of young minds of children. So, we need to be aware that this is going to have a huge impact for developing minds. Um, when children's products are advertised in a way that connotes violence with masculinity, boys will grow into young men that make that same association. If advertisements demonstrate that masculinity is inflated self-importance, with indulgent language, an absence of emotional intelligence, by only showing conflict and nothing else, and a refusal to acknowledge women, like because girls don't exist, then we'll have a society filled with men that display those same traits. And when children's products are advertised in a way that connotes femininity with self-sacrifice and self-denial, then girls will grow into young women that make that same association. If advertisements demonstrate that femininity is superficiality, I mean, only caring about clothes and things and pets and fashion, simple-mindedness, by only caring about how just so easy it is, submission, by only serving others, and pregnancy, then we'll have a society filled with women that display those same traits. So it's so important that we be critical of these messages that we're passing to our children and that we examine them, because if we don't, then we're allowing harmful gender stereotypes to reproduce through these ads. So that's the conclusion. I didn't time myself. I'm sure I went 1,000 times over the time limit, so I apologize if anybody actually sat through that. Thank you, Carrie. Thank you, class. It's been a really awesome semester. I had a lot of fun. This was probably one of the most rewarding classes that I've taken in my career as a college student. This is one of the subjects that I cared most about. I've been looking forward to taking this kind of class since I started college in 2007. I really care a lot about gender issues. I love the field of psycholinguistics. This was really interesting for me. Everybody in this class had really cool insight into the subject matter. I loved the material that you brought for us, Carrie. This was really, really great, like I said. So thanks again, everybody. Good luck in everything that you do after this, and have a good summer. Thanks.